This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my special guest tonight is James Loomstein. James, thanks for joining us on Rising
Oh,
Tide.
my pleasure. Happy to be here and hope to have a great conversation, bring a lot of value, and help your audience out.
So tell our Rising Tide listeners a little bit about James Loomstein.
Oh, sure. So my background has been in the digital marketing and advertising space for the last 20 years. I started in the marketing part of a large corporation. I then saw that I really wanted to work on like the marketing, like the hardcore marketing stuff. So back in the early 2000s, the best way to do that was to go back to school. And so I went back. I got my MBA at SMU here in Dallas. I went after the marketing strategy world. I quickly realized in my first year that wow, a lot of people in this class and my classmates had come from PepsiCo, American Airlines, Frito-Lay, larger companies here in Dallas, and that I had not. And that when we graduated, we were both going to have the same piece of paper, but they were still going to have that experience, and I wasn't, and I was going to be right back where I started. So in that moment, I decided that, wow, I need to get a little bit more practical, a higher level of practical application, and get some real stories to tell. So I went and started freelancing during grad school. I went up to companies. I got projects. I said, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. How can I make this work? And I got project 1 and then 2 and then 3. I then took that and leveraged it into a position in the advertising agency world. And from there, I made my career jump into marketing and worked at Omnicom for about 7 years. In 2010, I decided to walk out on corporate America. And, I had a strong passion for the entrepreneurial landscape. I had a strong passion for my own company. And I was incredibly passionate about the digital marketing landscape, about how you connected and engaged consumers, how brands grew, how you built community, et cetera. And I started a company called Digital Space Consulting. I grew that for about 4 years, doing the freelance game, contractor game, everything that everyone starts on that side. And then I had the opportunity to take a project at a larger consulting company. The guy who hired me ended up being my future business partner. And he had his own agency. I had my own agency at the time. We were better together, brought our agencies together. And that's the road marketing that you see before you today. So here we are.
So we got kind of the background, the backstory of on the business side of things, but on personal side of things, family.
Sure. So I'm married. We have 2 kids, 5th grade and 2nd, 10-year-old boy, 7-year-old daughter. We live here in Dallas. Very passionate about my Dallas sports scene. I'm very passionate and frustrated Dallas Cowboys fan.
Yeah, we were bemoaning that offline. Yeah,
for the better part of 25 years now. Also a big, Mavericks fan, Rangers and Stars, and then, root proudly for University of Texas, SMU, and SMU sports here.
So who do you root for when SMU plays Texas?
That doesn't really happen. But if I had to choose, even though I am from SMU, I'd probably say Texas. But don't tell them that.
Well, I have one of my third child is actually a junior at Baylor right now, and
excellent.
Kind of doing pre-law. So
excellent.
We're going to see how good Baylor is in
a couple
of weeks.
We are going to find out
when they hook the horns. So.
Yep.
Well, man, it's good to have you with us tonight, and I'm just kind of curious. I mean, you kind of mentioned you went solo in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So from 2010 to 2019, I mean, we're in kind of this quantum change, era, in this say this last decade. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the biggest change that when you look back at 2010 versus 2019? What are a couple of the just biggest changes in the way that digital marketing is done?
Yeah. Number one is how technology is used to connect and engage people, especially on the mobile side. Number 2 has been the proliferation of direct to consumer,
mm-hmm.
like the falling part of the retail apocalypse. That has been interesting. But I think the more important thing is from a business owner standpoint or, entrepreneurial side is that if you are under 30 here in 2019, you have never lived through a bad economy in your professional career. It has been nothing but great and moving up since you entered the workforce. If you are between 35 or 40 and 50, you have lived through two bad downturns in your economy. And I think there's a real moment there, actually, that if you're under 30 and you're looking to start, you've never really seen bad. You have just seen good growth. But if you're over, you have some realization. You've had, the downturn of the '08 economy.
Yeah.
If you're around, my age, around, I'm 42. If you're between 35 and 50, that was if you're 45 to 55 years old, like that was the heart of your professional career, and it was just taken from you. And I think that is a moment in time. It certainly changed my life. It changed lots of other lives. It's actually the reason I went out on my own. We had, our 10-year-old was just born in '09, and, our world was shook. And I think that's part of it that sort of led that entrepreneurial side. And then I think the second thing coming out of that is that we're living in a world where entrepreneurship has been romanticized. I think we're living in a world where people are giving up. If you're in college or in the working world, you have people either not entering, a six-figure salary for the chance of taking on 6 figures of debt. And they live in a world where the term CEO and startup and founder is cool. Well, if you're over 40 and you grew up and you went to school in the 80s and 90s, it was not cool to say you were a startup founder. It was not cool to say you're an entrepreneur. It actually meant you had no idea what you're doing with your life. And that has completely changed. And unfortunately, I think there's the downside of that, which, does hurt people. And they live in a world of where everything is amazing. And as a startup founder, that is, something I'd love to help change and champion. I'm not here to rain on anybody's parade, but I do feel like there is this romantic stigma that's out there that just needs to be talked about and moved on. And, I wish that more people would, take the opportunity of corporate America, honestly, to start. There's a lot of startup people that sort of hate on corporate America. I am one of them. But I also believe that corporate America serves a incredible foundation around operations, process, standardization, all those things that logistics that are incredibly critical to owning a business. Yep. And I think those are sort of a few areas that have been impacted over the last decade.
You mentioned the kind of the 2008 downturn. I mean, I'm thinking just the .com boom too. If you're kind of in that same
the '01, same thing. Right.
Certainly walked through that as well. But so it's interesting. I mean, I know that you also teach a course at SMU. So
I do.
When you're talking to students, I mean, is that course kind of in the entrepreneurial space, or?
It is. So it's the combination of digital strategy and entrepreneurship. And so what typically happens in most higher ed is, here's your Harvard Business Review. Here's how a big corporation would solve that problem. But it's not really giving you the tools, tactics, and things that you need to be successful as a small business owner. If I wanted to go out and start James's Water, that's a little challenging. If PepsiCo wanted to launch a brand new water company, they could do that tomorrow. They could roll out branding. They would have shelf space. They would have a built-in customer base. They could launch on Facebook and get 100,000 fans just like that, and really not even bat an eye. But the problem is that we sit here and say, well, you should definitely go out and start your own water company, and you should be this of that and the Uber of, and you should do it on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and it becomes incredibly romanticized. And and the real purpose of my class is to help teach a couple things. One being, how do we not underestimate the cost of customer acquisition? How do we not understand and really focus on how big of an audience there actually is? And then what does it actually take to make revenue, and profit?
Right.
And at the end of the day, like, how do we get money out of someone's pocket and put it in our pocket? So the real foundation of the class is, yes, there's the tools, right? The digital stuff, the social, paid, web, video, the next thing, whatever that is. But on the flip side, it's like, how do you take an unknown name, an unknown brand, a limited amount of capital, and go, right? How do you make that stuff happen? Because everybody thinks it just happens. And everybody gets very busy doing all the things, but nothing's actually happening.
Yeah.
And so we really need to focus on, like, how do we leverage and grow a business and a brand and move it from an idea to a revenue producing entity.
It's interesting as you were talking about kind of the romanticization of
Yes.
entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
When you talk to and I don't want to make this an age thing, but when you talk to somebody that might have a more romantic ideal, what do you think is the biggest problem that they will encounter? Is it when they hit that first hurdle, they're like, whoa, I mean, how do I react to a downturn? How do I react to the fact that I can't get any clients, or that they don't pay me on time, or or I got a tax bill I didn't anticipate, or I mean, what do you think is just feeling romantic about the ideal is one thing, but how does that have an adverse effect on them moving forward and making progress and a more realistic progress, I guess?
That's a great question. I think that there's a couple things. I think people are romantic about their idea. Someone told them they were amazing. Their mom told them amazing. Who said this is a great idea, and they didn't actually focus on, is there actually an audience? It's incredibly expensive and hard, honestly, to educate a market. And if you're coming out with the new thing and you're supposed to convince people, that is way different than serving a market that actually has a problem.
That's a great point.
And I think the second part of that is the difference between doing it because you're passionate about it and doing it because that's what you're supposed to, doing it because you think that's your out. So the people who go and start the business because, they found a market opportunity, but they don't have an interest in it. They just have an interest in the money part. Those are the people that fail. And I tell people, like, I'm incredibly passionate about digital marketing and strategy, and I read and I watch, and this is what I love to do. And so that's the reason I'm good at it, and I continue to do it. But if I wasn't passionate about it, you still have, rent and ownership and operating and employees and all those things that, you're here because you are passionate about it. And I think the people who are like, I'm going to, be a millionaire in year 3, that's always the magic number. Like, everyone's going to make $1 million in their 3rd year. And I always ask them, I'm like, that's in 1,000 days. What were you doing 1,000 days ago? Like, how does that move from nothing to $1 million? And that seems to be the number everyone thinks. And if you're at top, we talk about the top 1%, 2%, 3%, that number is 414,000. You're talking about tripling that. Like, you are definitely trying to be a 1%er of even gross revenue, like gross. Yep. You're trying to be a 1%er in 1,000 days. And when you think about it that way, like, wow, that's a little challenging. It is a lofty goal. And I think probably that, unrealistic. Yeah. And I think the second part of it is what I think actually breeds and creates success and momentum. I think people underestimate the power of operational efficiency. I think that you have a lot of people, you can scale a business, you can grow, you can cut your prices, you can race to the bottom, you can do all those things. But operational efficiency is actually a key metric and success driver of growth.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tantamount almost to the idea that, when people are working on personal budgets, they're saying, okay, I just have to make more money. You
No,
just have to make more money. And they're thinking,
no.
but you forgot the left side of that equation that
Right.
says how much you're spending. So how do
Yeah.
you work on both sides of those,
Yeah.
for sure. So
Yeah. Operational efficiency, I think, is a key component for growth. And, not everybody, focuses on the accounting and the finance and supply chain and logistics and, the cost of customer acquisition, the cost of, a lead, the lifetime value, the percent of engagement, the share of voice. All of those things really matter. Like, it is too hard to just say, I'm going to post on Facebook and that's going to solve all my problems. Like, not everybody is as passionate about the thing you're selling as you are. And, you get caught up in this world of, well, everyone's just as passionate about, t-shirts, or everybody's as passionate about valet parking, or everybody, like, no, they're not. Like, they're passionate
everybody
about their
watches
thing.
Shark Tank.
Everybody watches Shark Tank, right? Like, that's the thing.
So we talked a little bit about, you teaching at the university level.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about rogue marketing. And so let's you and I are stepping on an elevator and we're going to go up about 10 floors. You got a minute. So kind of give me your elevator pitch and maybe outline who would be your ideal client.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think we're a marketing agency. I think it's sales and marketing put together. We focus on growth-oriented, let's call it challenger brands that have an outcome they want to achieve. They want to move into a market. They want to launch a new product. There's something standing in their way and they need to make it happen. Now, we happen to focus on solving business problems. We might execute through the marketing lens, but at the end of the day, we're sitting here trying to solve the business problem. And on two sides. Number one is about simplifying and speeding up marketing and strategy. Everybody wants strategy, but nobody wants to pay for it. Everybody wants it to happen, and they all want it to happen yesterday. And so where those things come in is, it might be focused on audience building. It might be focused on business growth. But at the end of the day, we're sitting here on two things. One, focusing on an outcome, and two, minimizing the risk in which to get there. With being agnostic to the tools, platforms, techniques that are out there. Like, what's the business problem? And then what are the levers that need to be pulled to solve that problem?
So do you help people with their operational processes as well as part of this, or is that kind of a different strain?
So yeah, I think that there's, clicks and impressions are not going to solve your business problem. Screaming louder and longer than your competitor isn't going to win either, because you can't do that today. And, and really focusing on what does it actually take to get someone from top of funnel all the way down to acquisition. How many do we need? Where do we need to focus? What platforms to use, when and where? How do we pull this lever? Do we focus more on awareness? Do we have an issue at consideration to purchase? Like, can we get people to make that switch? Do we need to focus more on loyalty and advocacy? Like, where in there is the problem? And then what levers need to be pulled? Do we have an operations problem? Do we have a customer order and fulfillment issue? Do we have a retention problem? Okay. Is going out and getting more customers actually going to solve our problem, or is it going to exacerbate something further down? Right. Like, and that's sort of where we focus our efforts.
Is there when you look at, the kind of the client landscape out there, are there certain products that you all would say, no, we're not going to take that on? I guess the bigger question is, does the product actually matter?
The product doesn't matter. What matters is, is there an outcome that needs to be achieved? And has there been something standing in the way of making that outcome happen? Or is there just a need for smart marketing to be around to help solve that problem, right? Because if they know what they need, if you just need the thing, if I just had 10 more blog posts, or if I just spend a little bit more on paid media, that would save my problem. Or if I just used a red background instead of a blue background, that would clearly solve all my problems, right? If that's the thing, then go do the thing. But when you can't put your finger on it, when you've been struggling with the problem for years or months or a quarter, like, that is where you need just people to come in and actually solve the problem. But they didn't understand like what the problem is, right? Like, spending more money doesn't solve the problem. It might help, but it's not going to solve it, right? And so where do we focus our efforts to actually solve the problem and move forward? That's where we focus our effort.
So what is your biggest hurdle that you've got to get over to? Is it you have to educate clients first before they see value in the service you're providing, or the majority of people you talk to, are they pretty, socially savvy right now, and they understand what they need? They just are trying to find, is your firm the best fit type thing?
You know what? I think this kind of happens like sort of the passion for where we focus our efforts, and you might call it like your why, like why do you do this and who do you serve? I think that there is a mid-market out there of 10 million, 50, 100, 500 million, $1 billion company, right? They are frustrated and they are stuck. And here's what I think is happening in the market. And this is sort of like our why. This is who I seek to serve. I worked in corporate America. I could have easily stayed the consulting route. I could have easily gone into the management consulting world and served the Fortune 500 world and done that. But I think what you see is this, let's call it the mid-market, who are stuck and frustrated. And here's why, is that there are these companies, they are, in these areas, they are growth oriented. They are trying to make things happen. There is a CEO out there or a board out there who's like, oh, we need to start leveraging some more marketing. We need to make this happen. So what do? They go out and they recruit a marketing person who, let's call them a director or some bigger fish, a smaller person in a big pond, right? Mm-hmm. They had the title, they had the position. They bring them to this smaller world, the mid-market, and they're like, you're going to be the big fish. You're going to run everything. So this person comes in, they lay out the plan. It's a great plan. It's 6 months. It's beautiful. It's diagrammed. It's everything you'd expect in Fortune 500 world. It's full of big enterprise tools. It's full of all the stuff that would work at the big Fortune 500. And then the CEOs, and then the marketing person says, here's my plan. And the CEO says, that's great. And they're like, go do it. And that person's like, well, I can't do it. Like where I was, I had 20 people, I had agencies, I had partners. They did it. I just came up with a plan.
Like, I don't even know where the stapler is.
Right. I'm just here to tell you the plan. And then they get frustrated and that person's out. And the CEO is left with a plan and a really expensive plan and no one to do. So then the CEO and the lead executive board comes in and like, you know what, we need to find some doers. And so they go and hire, 2 early career people, because 2 is what they all do, right? And they're going to be in charge of marketing, whatever marketing is to them. And they're like, well, here's the plan, go execute the plan. And they do. And it works because the plan was a good plan. And then they come around in the next year and the executive board says, all right, what are we going to do next year? And they're like, well, I'm young. I don't have experience. You tell me what to do. And the executive board says, well, I need people to come up with the plan now. Like it's a new year. And then these people get frustrated. And so they're out. And then the CEO and executive board are like, you know what we need? We know what we need. So we're going to go out and get a tactic, right? We're going to put in Marketo. We're going to put in HubSpot. We're going to put in tools to make all this stuff happen. And they do that, or they're like, you know what? We're going to go find, the 2-person agency, and they're going to do all this stuff for us. But the problem is every time they come back, the solution they provide is the thing they're great at. You need more content because we're a content shop. You need a better website because we're a web shop. You need more money in paid media because we're a paid media shop. And then you have these people in their unilateral silos that are all doing stuff. Everybody's busy. Nothing's happening. The business isn't moving forward. And the CEOs and executives are frustrated once again. So then they go out and they're like, we're going to get rid of that. We're going to go to a full service agency. We're going to go get the mid-sized, larger agency, and they're going to solve our problem. And the biz dev team is going to come in. They're going to wow them with all the amazing things they can do. And then they're going to be like, all right, ready to start the engagement. And here comes the young, recent graduate, early in their career, whippersnapper, who's going to tell them how to run their business and all the things they should do. And that agency where they thought they were getting all the love at the really high retainer, in month 1, 2, and 3, it's there. And then month 7, 8, and 9, they're like, where's this big retainer coming from? Why am I doing this? What's happening? And then they're like, you know what? I'm done with the agencies because agencies don't do anything. I'm going to go out and hire myself another person who worked at Fortune 500 who's going to come in, and the cycle just continues.
Start the cycle again.
And that is the world we live in. And what's happening today, that cycle is just speeding up. CMOs are not lasting long. CMOs are responsible for everything. They have to, fly the ship while they fly the plane while they build it. They're responsible for growth, but at the same time, short-term growth, but long-term planning. They look around, they're like, where's my infrastructure? Where's my team? I don't have one. And just the cycle just continues.
Yeah.
Right. Limited budget, no resources. I need higher quality leads and conversions, but here's less money to make it happen. Great. And that's the thing that's happening. And, I feel for them. I really do. I think that these mid-sized companies and brands that are out there are stuck. They're frustrated. They're short on resources. They're long on plans. They're knee-jerk reactions, and they can't move forward, and they can't get to that big company, and they're just stuck here in the middle. In the middle is just a bad place to be.
So where do you break into that cycle? And just as a quick side note,
yeah,
I've been doing this for 2 years, every week for 2 years. I think that is the most thorough explanation of somebody understanding their market at such a deep level that I think of anybody that's ever explained that. So where does rogue marketing break into that cycle?
In a couple of places. I think it's people who have been frustrated. They hear the story, and then it's not for them. And then they come back a year later and nothing has happened, and they're still stuck, and they're still frustrated, and they can't get past that big rock that's there. Like, those are where that's where we shine. Like, and those types of companies and clients, and I appreciate the compliment, but that is what I see. Like, and I actually feel for them. I think that the other part of that is on the recruitment of talent, right? Like, they're big enough in their own world, but they can't get the attention. They'll never get the attention of the big agency that they need long-term. They might get it for, the beginning, but they're not going to get it long-term. And then on a talent side, like, the marketing world has become so competitive. It's been so driven by individual people who are very talented at the thing, that they cannot recruit everything they need to be successful.
Yeah.
And they are just stuck. And the reality is that, maybe for the first 10, 15, 20, last 15, 20 years, pre like 2012, 2010, like maybe pre-iPhone, they were successful. They needed the distributed sales force. They needed the wholesalers. They needed the distribution. And like, that's how they grew. And now, like, the barriers to entry are so low. There's so much noise in the market that the consumer just has more unlimited choice, and they do need to find a way to make it successful. Right. And that's where I think they're getting stuck. And I think that's why it's catching up a little bit more rapidly. It seems like, patience is a big thing, but it seems like something that would have taken off in 2010, 2012, 14, but it just wasn't. But you can totally tell over the last couple of years that, and I'm empathetic. Like, I feel it and I see them, and, I'm just here to help.
I have a feeling that if I'm a CEO, if I'm a board, and you're sitting in front of me and you tell that story, that even if it's not exact to a T, that I can certainly identify with the different milestones in there and go, yeah, remember we had them. Remember when we did that guy? That guy was Ivy League. We came in had all the credentials, just didn't know how to execute. And they're going, I mean, that in essence would be your sales pitch. It's like, I'm just going to give you I'm going to outline the story for you here and tell you where we can kind of break this continuous vicious cycle that you find yourself in. So, and play that role. And I love kind of the whole idea of this mid-market. These companies are out there, 5-10 million, annual revenue that you've never heard of. I mean, you drive down the street, look off to the side, it's kind of a nondescript building, and you're going, I would never imagine they were generating that kind of revenue. But
there's $100 million companies like that too. That you would never imagine that have grown, and they're hit a spot. And, half of them are just like, I just want to maintain my market share, right?
Yep.
Marriott and Sheraton and Hilton wanted to maintain their market share against each other, and then Airbnb showed up, right?
Yeah.
and this sort of direct to consumer phenomenon, the Amazon effect,
Yep.
the instant order and gratification world that we live in, like all of those things have kind of taken place. And, the pie is still the pie. The problem is now there's too many people entering. The pie is not getting bigger. The pieces are just getting smaller.
Right.
Like nothing's really growing. You're just having to share it with more people, and they're all just fighting against that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're right. It's such a noisy world.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to really do things that are you have to differentiate yourself in some manner, and hopefully it's through quality, not just noise.
Yeah,
sound. So
I don't think you can clicks and, like I said before, clicks and impressions do not solve business problems.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I keep drilling down on, I'm just feeding you questions and just letting you answer all night long. But I really want to get to, really a crucial segment of our rising tide chats and kind of building our library. And this is such an interesting question, I think, to especially people that are further down the road like you are, that if you were doing this again tomorrow, if you were starting over again tomorrow, walk us through the process of those that are, maybe sitting in a cube all day, or they're thinking, I got to start a side gig. I want to start something on my own. I want to follow a passion, project and really go all in type thing. So walk us through kind of the 3 to 5 step strategy that you would employ to really start again tomorrow, start something.
Sure. I think step 1 is audience first, product second. I think that there has to be an available universe of people or consumers who are there to actively buy your product or service. Most people like I said before, most people underestimate the cost of attention and the cost of customer acquisition. Those are 2 critical factors. Part B of that would be is just because you're passionate about it doesn't mean everybody else is. So that leads back to like, is there an audience out there? And you can get that through, even keyword research, just going out. How many people are searching for the thing that you're providing? How many options are there on Amazon for your product? Most people will tell you that, competition is bad. I mean, competition is great. Like, you want a competitive market. You want people to have choice, not unlimited choice, but like you want them to have an option. They need to have something to compare to. They need to be able to seek you out, find other options. If you're the only thing in the world that does that, then you have to educate people that they need to do that. Alternatively, it's already been out there. You are just maybe you're serving an underserved market, but there is a market out there for the thing that you're providing, product or service. I think the second part of that is understanding what's called the diffusion of innovation. And basically it's an adoption methodology. You can go and just Google diffusion of innovation, and what you'll see is just a large bell curve. So here's what happens is that somebody goes, they're thinking, they're in their cubicle, they're in their office, they're on their sales route, and they're like, I'm going to sell X product. And turns out, let's say they're going to sell, t-shirts, right? And they're going to sell women's t-shirts. That's their thing. Well, congratulations, you just knocked out 50% of the world, right? So let's not do that. The second part of that is like, let's make sure there's actually a total universe and an available universe. So a total universe might be, all humans need a shirt, right? So there's 7 billion of those. Of those, how many are actually available? Like, who out there, it's not 7 billion, that's not the number, right? So it's probably smaller than that. So you need to start with that number, not the bigger number. And the second one is about adoption rate. So what ends up happening is people are saying, I'm going to make $1 million in year 3, right? So I'm going to be making $1 million every year. That is about $100,000 a month in sales. And that is, just doing that, like what, $3,000 a day. Like, that's going to happen, right? And so they're not thinking about, well, what happens when those first sales don't happen on day 1 or year 3, right? So what ends up happening is there's like this cash burn rate where it says that, you know what, when I wrote my business case, it was built on the bigger number, the total universe, not the available. And the second part of that equation is, well, it's built on this customer adoption rate. So it turns out in diffusion innovation, doesn't matter if it's sneakers, iPhones, water, whatever it is, only 2.5% of the population is your early adopters.
Yep.
There's another part that's sort of like your early majority, your late majority, your laggers, right? All of these things that play out. And if you were working your way through the top of the bell curve, you would hit about like 60% of the market. So when you're sitting here, and this is where I think most companies fail, it's not always the plan, it's about like working the plan. And if I had to go over and if I had to educate and like do this for selling a product and service, number one, how big is the available universe, not the total? And then what happens if I only get 60% of the market? Can I still succeed? Do I have enough cash? Will this work? Like that is the number we have to use. Not really the 60, like, can I afford the 2% and the 16%, like 18% for the first year, or definitely not day one of sales. I'm not going to open the door and sales are going to happen that day, but like, how can I play this out to actually have adoption? I don't have 100% market share. I never will. It's the smaller number. Like, can I make this profitable? And I think too many people focus on the bigger number and 100% adoption, and they ran out of money, like as things are taking off. So that'd be number two.
Wow.
And then I think the third part is about investing in non-revenue producing activities. I think that looking back on myself personally, the faster I invested in non-revenue producing activities or dropping the things I sucked at and outsourcing it to other people, the more beneficial that was to our growth and the more it happened and more it helped us grow. So I'll give you an example. We could all sit here and pump out invoices on Excel and Google Sheets and send all that and do all your books in Excel, right? Or you could spend a little money and go on Zoho. You could spend a little bit more than that and go on QuickBooks. You could spend a little bit more than that and get a bookkeeper. You could spend a little more than that and get an accountant. Like you can go all the way up. The faster you can get, for me, it was the finance side of operations. The faster I got that off my plate and let somebody else take it, and hired I think our first bookkeeper was from like a Upwork, and $50 an hour, and what she could do in 3 hours would take me 8. And the faster I paid her $150 so I could go off and do the things I was great at, the better off we were. And whether that's on the services side of project management or finance or accounting or HR, whatever the non-revenue producing activities, the faster you can invest in non-revenue producing activities, the faster you will grow. Too many people want to associate, they want to put $1 in the machine and get $1.50 back, whether that's in marketing or people or sales or whatever it is. But what if I were to tell you, if I put $1 in this machine and I got back 60 cents, but I put $1 in this machine and I got back $2.40, like I would do that all day, right? But too many people just look at the thing instead of looking at the system. And the more they focus on the system, the better off they'll be moving forward.
Now, I love the way you kind of wrap that up. And I just as a follow-up question, I'm just curious, if you were starting again tomorrow, is there a specific like industry that you would target, or would you just love digital marketing space? You would stay there, or what would you do? What's in an ideal world?
Yeah, I probably would. I'm passionate about technology. Been passionate about marketing since I was a kid. And I love the consultative, like teaching side, right? I mean, I teach in graduate school. And so I think it's a great combination of those three things. And, I'm fortunate and lucky to, have a great wife and partner who, helped us allow the opportunity to go out and start a business. I have a great business partner that we complement each other so well. It wasn't two people who were great at the same thing,
right,
and couldn't do the other things they weren't good at. Like we were able to make that work. And so, I've been fortunate and lucky to have that, around me.
So as we wrap up tonight, is there anything that I haven't touched on that you want to just kind of leave with our audience as we're closing out here, and just tell people where the best place to find you is? And I know that you said on your website that Go Rogue Marketing is always looking for good people to join the team. So
we do look for people who are what I would call a lifelong learner, people who are passionate about the thing, or, why things work the way they do. The discoverability, I think, is a real key component. If I had one, like, the people listen to your podcast, or, they're driving or thinking about starting, I think there's two things. I think, patience is a real thing. I can tell you, as amazing it always looks on the outside, it's a lot of hard work and the things that actually make that thing happen. And that passion and the ability to make decisions are critical parts of success. I think in the entrepreneurial world, I'll back up one. In the entrepreneurial world, I think if you're great at the thing, that's wonderful. There's lots of people who are good, right, at doing this stuff, building it, whatever. But overly passionate matters, and decision-making matters. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you have the ability to make decisions in a sea of darkness and under utter chaos, you can be a successful entrepreneur. But the people who need all the facts, need to make it happen, have the plan, lay it out, that is where it kind of falls apart. I look at sports teams, the military, like those are sort of the things that, Navy SEALs, right? The ability to make a decision and move forward, the ability to say we're going left instead of right, the ability to pinpoint this is the thing that we're going to do. Like those are critical parts of being a successful entrepreneur and a founder, running a company, knowing the difference if you're what I would call a number one versus a number two. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of people out there who want to be a number one, but they would be so much happier as a number two or a three or a four. But living in this world of like, you have to own a company, you have to build it, you have to yes. But on the flip side, the 16th person at Google is doing okay, right? Or the 400th person at Google is doing okay. And at the same time, I think that we're just romanticizing it so much that it's binary. You're either the CEO or you're not.
Right.
But with that comes with an amazing amount of other things that sort of play in. And just because it's there doesn't mean you have to take it. And there's a lot of people that, vice versa, who are out there working their corporate job. There's a lot of frustrated 40, 50, 60-year-old people who have been in a thing for 20, 30 years, who are kind of stuck there now. And, they make 80K, 100K, 200K. There's a lot, like, it looks great, but they're frustrated. And I think there's honestly a lot of people who make, 80, 70, 80, 90, $100,000 a year, who would be so much happier at 50, 60, 70, right? And just doing the thing they want.
Doing their own gig, yeah.
Doing their own gig. Yeah. But sitting here saying it has to make $1 million in year three, I don't think that's a real thing. Yeah. I think there's just too much of that going on right now.
I could not agree more. I love that the idea you're talking about, just kind of working the plan. I love that saying that said everybody's got to, every boxer's got a plan until you get hit in the face.
That's right.
But how do you kind of fight through that and in that kind of period of darkness you were talking about as entrepreneurs and how they can operate? So
yeah, I think it's kind of like I think the mental game is harder than the physical game. I look at athletes. I look at athletes. I look at people who have been, suffered an injury, who fight chronic pain, all those things. I think the mental game of it is so much harder than the physical, the rehab, the getting punched in the face, whatever the thing is. And so I think it's important. That side is number one. And number two is I think people need to live in the gray. I think that if you were sitting here, we talk about like sports fans, right? Mm-hmm. Fanatics. They live on every win. They hate every loss. They can't live in the middle. You watch every team, they just live in the middle, right? Yep. It's like we won or we lost, and we move on.
Unless you're the Patriots, they tend
to
live.
They just keep winning.
They just keep winning, yeah.
Or any team from Boston.
That's exactly right.
But for the rest of us out there, right? I think the people's ability to just live in the gray. I got a great win. Great. Let's move on. We just lost, a client, or, this order didn't come through. Great. Let's move on. Like the ability to keep moving forward, to live in that gray, to not get too high, not take too low. focus on that part, the ability to make decisions in the sea of darkness, like those are the things I think make people successful. But if you're the emotionality of it, if you're getting too high, if you get too low, if this album didn't do well or did great, or I got that part, didn't get that great part, I made that shot, I missed this field goal, like that will never play. Like that long-term play, that never works out. But you just live in the middle. I think it's probably a good place to be.
Wow. I love the way you kind of wrapped up tonight and painted that kind of that sports metaphor of just operating within the middle, because at the end of the day, I mean, that's where every team that doesn't win the Super Bowl ends up. So
only one team wins.
Have to have a short memory, and you have to, as like a good cornerback, has to have a very short memory. And
every entrepreneur, CEO, founder, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO of, Nike or Under Armour or American Airlines or, Chase or JP Morgan, or you're the CEO of the lawn care company or the dry cleaning or the fence maker or the bricklayer. They all battle the same thing, right? Everyone's trying to grow to the next level. But if you're caught up in the middle and you can't make decisions, then you can't really move forward.
Well, James, I appreciate your time tonight, and it's just been a real pleasure just to kind of, just jump inside your head a little bit and just continue to ask probing questions and letting you kind of unwrap this for our audience tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
All of our Rising Tide listeners, I just want to thank you for that. And to learn more about him, go to gorogue.net is the Rogue Marketing website, and a lot of good stuff there. And he's got some videos on YouTube, and there's other places that you can find him online. But just little vignettes out there that just talk about specific topics at different times, and different people have interviewed him. So I encourage you to look him up online. But James, thanks again for just taking the time and just helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Have a great night.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.